pressing one of the stop buttons, that'll let us know you're wanting off. I'll be announcing them in advance. Excuse me, everyone needs to keep their voices down. You need to hop off at the next spot if you want Italian language. So, if you're rolling up at any of the stops, make sure to press the stop button. If you're wanting to rejoin later on, make sure to signal clearly to the driver. Excuse me, I'm trying to announce safety instructions right now and how the tour works. Other people are trying to listen to me and they have paid to listen to me. So please keep your voices down. Make sure to signal clearly to the driver as they're approaching the stop if you want to rejoin by holding out your hand. There are some stops we can't use today because of roadworks. Stop number 9 is out, so use stop 8 instead. And we also can't use stops 13 to 15, so if you're wanting to use that, use stop 16 instead. So let's get started with the tour proper. Now we're currently heading along Cathedral Street, which as you might expect takes us to Glasgow Cathedral, which is the oldest building in the city, dating back to the 12th century. And sitting on the spot that Glasgow itself was first founded back in the 6th century by Mungo, or Saint Mungo as he's known today. There's a little statue of Mungo up there to the left-hand side. In modern times, though, Cathedral Street is sometimes known as the Street of Learning, dominated by buildings belonging to the City of Glasgow College and the University of Strathclyde, which we see on the right-hand side here. This is the second of 3 universities in Glasgow. Originally founded in 1796 as the Andersonian Technical Institute, it was officially awarded its Royal Charter in 1964. Famous students over the years at its 2 guises, including John Logie Baird, the pioneer of television, David Livingstone, the missionary and doctor, and Dr. Henry Forbes, pioneer of forensic medicine, particularly fingerprinting. So if you like crime drama, kind of started here. Stretching off to the left-hand side now is a large domed building, which is the Royal Infirmary, a hugely important hospital in medical history. It was where the first radiological department in the world was housed. It's where the standard practice of wearing white lab coats was introduced. And it was while working here that the famous English surgeon, Dr. Joseph Lister, became known as the father of modern surgery. Pioneering techniques, particularly involving antiseptics, that revolutionised the efficacy and the survivability of serious surgeries. So there, the cathedral is in front of us now. And that means we're approaching stop number 2 for the cathedral, the St Mungo's Museum, and the Province Lordship. If I see someone hit the button, we will be stopping at stop number 2. Now I'm afraid the cathedral is not open for visiting today. It is currently shooting a major new Hollywood movie. It's being used as a filming location. A new version of Frankenstein, directed by Guillermo del Toro, and starring the likes of Oscar Isaac and Lars Nicholson. We also see a statue in front of the cathedral which depicts David Livingstone, and behind the cathedral the Glasgow Necropolis, a beautiful Victorian cemetery inspired by the Père Lachaise in Paris. And between the cathedral and the necropolis is a little valley, which is probably where Glasgow gets its name from. Glasgow coming from Glasgow, which in the old Celtic languages meant green hollow. Now Glasgow actually only becomes a city in the Victorian era. In 1800 it's a large town, a few tens of thousands of people, but 1900 becomes one with well over 1 million people. So for that reason we don't have a lot of pre-Victorian architecture. The cathedral on our left-hand side now is the most obvious example. Well, on the right-hand side we pass by the Province Lordship there. That pale cream-coloured building is the oldest house in Glasgow, built back in 1474. So this is pulling up to stop number 2 for anyone who wants to hop off here. And if anyone does need the multilingual service, the next one of those buses will be here in about 10 minutes time. So you can hop off here and there'll be a multilingual bus along in about 10 minutes. Now, Glasgow, in fact, for its first few centuries, was just a small site of religious pilgrimage, only developing into a town in the second millennium as it follows the route we're taking just now down towards the Clyde, developing southwards. You also see a beautiful mural on the right-hand side, which depicts St Mungo in modern attire, tending to a little bird, one of these 4 miracles. And are represented on our coat of arms by the bird, the bell, the fish and the tree, these miracles leading to him becoming St Mungo. Now, murals by the Australian-born artist Sam Bates, who has a number of pieces in the city. After Glasgow started growing for a bit, its town centre becomes Glasgow Cross, which is the meeting point of our 4 medieval streets, the Trongate, Salt Market, Gallowgate, and the High Street, which we're on just now. And we're coming to that shortly, which is also served by stop number 3. It's also the stop for the Glasgow Police Museum. Glasgow, home to the third oldest underground metro system in the world, is what I was going to say, but I was talking about police. It's home to the oldest metropolitan police force in the world. And once these lights turn green, take a look to the right-hand side, and we'll see more murals, which were commissioned by Strathclyde in 2014 to celebrate 50 years of their royal charter. Sorry, can you take a seat, please? We are in motion.
Yes, it's okay.
A couple of hundred years ago, though, we'd have seen a different university here on the High Street, the University of Glasgow, which was founded back in 1451. And its campus used to be here on the left-hand side. But it's not here today, with the exception of a single wall that remains that we'll see here on the left. In the 1870s, Glasgow was a very cramped city and the university had run out of space to develop, so they moved to a new site in the 1870s, which we'll see later. And most of the old college, as it had become known, was subsequently demolished, with the exception, as I say, of this wall. So up ahead of us now is Glasgow Cross. The meeting point of these 4 oldest streets are Old Town Centre. The view dominated by this clock tower coming up on the right-hand side, which is the toll booth steeple dating back to the 1630s. And built as part of a larger building, the toll booth that served as Glasgow's original town hall. This is where the decisions for the citizenry were made. It's where you would go to pay your taxes. It's also where you would go if you didn't pay your taxes. It was home to a debtor's prison. The rest of the toll booth would have been on the right-hand side as we look at it. It was demolished, though, in the early 1900s to make way for the continuing development of Glasgow. When we move through the next junction, you'll also see off to the right-hand side, very quickly, a little orange clock tower, the Tron Steeple, which is the second oldest church building in Glasgow, after the cathedral dating back to the late 1500s. Well, just in front of us and on the left there, we have the Market Cross, or Market Cross, a little octagonal structure with a unicorn on top of it. It's actually only about 100 years old, but it's a replica of an old medieval cross, recreated by the Edinburgh-born architect Edith Hughes. Every town and village in Scotland that was allowed to hold markets would have once had a market cross denoting that right. And if you're wondering why there's a unicorn on top, well, the unicorn is Scotland's national animal, thought to represent strength and grace. It was adopted onto our coat of arms by King William I of Scotland. Next stop we'll come to stop number 4 for the famous Barra's Market and Blickman's, the oldest sweet shop in Glasgow. If anyone would like off at stop 4. Press the stop button just now. On the left hand side we'll see a mural here which depicts Billy Connolly, or the Big 'Un, the famous actor, comedian and musician. One of several commissioned to celebrate his 50th birthday here in Glasgow. Billy, in some ways, the unofficial ambassador of Glasgow for much, in particular, of the late 20th century, especially the 1970s and 80s. The town in Glasgow was struggling with a lot of economic and social deprivation, the heavy industries which have made their name, like shipbuilding and steelworking, starting to disappear.
Oh, they are leaving. Yeah, you're living in London.
Yeah.
London.
On the right-hand side, the Barrowland Park is named after the famous Barrowland Ballroom. Again, can I ask for the third time now, if you are having conversations, you need to keep your voices as low as possible so that other people can hear me. I realise kids, that might not be possible, but adults, you need to keep your voices low. So we'll see the entryway to the Barrows just up ahead of us. Just over 100 years old and once the largest covered market in Europe. Established by a legend of Glasgow named Maggie McIver. Stands us now at stop 4 for the folk who want to hop off here.
Just to let you know, folks, what I'm talking about. Yeah. So if I have to come here. Yeah, if you come here, it's simply 12 minutes. So thank you. No problem.
So welcome aboard, folks. Those who have just joined, my name is Ross, and our driver is Sol. After we turn this corner, look off to the right-hand side and we'll see another couple of 18th century buildings. There's number 52 Charlotte Street, the pale building with the brown door, which is the oldest house in Glasgow that's still occupied, designed by the great Georgian architect Robert Adam back in the 1870s. Sorry, in the 1780s rather. Got my two digits mixed up there. And there's also a clock tower there, the steeple of St Andrew's in the square. Beautiful old church building, built over a period of 17 years in the mid-18th century. So we're now going to turn into Glasgow Green, one of the oldest public parks in Europe. These lands are a gift to the people of Glasgow from King James II of Scotland. Back in 1450, historic events to have taken place here include Bonnie Prince Charlie stationing his army here as part of the failed Jacobite rebellion of the Jews in the square. And Rangers Football Club, one half of the famous Old Firm who dominates Scottish football, played their first matches here in Glasgow Green, with the great rival Celtic being founded just a few hundred yards away in the old St Mary's Church. The next stop will come to stop number 5. That is the stop for Glasgow Green, for Templeton on the Green, a beautiful old carpet factory originally designed in the style of the Doge's fountain in Venice, now used by, amongst others, the West microbrewery and restaurant. The brew beer is based on a blend of Scottish ingredients, but according to the German Reinheitsgebot tradition. So that's the Doge's Palace in front of us. We also have the Dalton Fountain, the largest terracotta fountain in the world, which depicts Queen Victoria looking out over Australia, South Africa, Canada and India. And then off to the left, the People's Palace, a beautiful old museum, originally opened in 1897, which is closed for major refurbishment now. So this is now pulling up to stop number 5 for anyone who wants off here. So for the folk who've just joined us, welcome aboard. My name's Ross and our driver is Saul. Guys, you can't stand on the staircase, you'll need to take seats as soon as possible, please. Down to the left hand side, the Nelson Monument. It's the oldest monument to Admiral Lord Nelson in Britain. Completed within a year of his victory and death back in 1805. And the next stop is stop number 6, and people can't have quiet conversations, then you'll need to get off there. I'm serious, other people have paid money for this tour, and they've paid to listen to me. If you're not interested in listening to me, I don't care, but you'll show respect for the other customers, or you'll get off the bus and you can use a multilingual. And please put your phones on silent. Coming up on the right hand side, we'll pass by a pale building in a patch of grass here, St Andrew's on the Green, another old 18th century church. Dating from 1751. And in front of us we'll also see the High Court of Glasgow. The modern building that's used as the High Court is the pale one, yellowish one we'll see immediately in front of us, and to the left of that is the older grey High Court. Also behind the High Court is the Merchant Steeple, which dates back to the 1660s, built as an observation tower, allowing views down the River Clyde so folk could see the boats laden with their goods, sailing up and sailing away again in just a moment. So on the right, the High Court and the Merchant Steeple. On the left-hand side, the McClellan Arch. Originally built as part of the assembly rooms, also designed by Robert Adam. They were demolished again during our Victorian and Edwardian rapid expansion. A move to the present-day site in the 1920s provides a rather grand entrance for the various events that take place in Glasgow Green. Like Transmit, now Scotland's busiest music festival, and the World Pipe Band Championships, which were taking place here just last weekend, in fact, won by a band from Inveraray. So we'll now get our first view on the River Clyde on this particular tour. Across the water from us, the famous Gorbals district of Glasgow, today home to the college's nautical campus, as well as the Glasgow Central Mosque. Historic characters from here, including John MacDonald, the first Prime Minister of Canada, Alan Bibberton, founder of the eponymous detective agency, Benny Lynch, the championship boxer, and Thomas Lipton, famous tea merchant, competitive sailor, and pioneer of self-promotion, it has to be said. Well, the same next stop is stop number 6 for the Britannia Panopticon, the world's oldest music hall, for the St Enoch Shopping Centre. Probably the stop for the old fish market as well, which is on the right hand side, an 1860s building that's now used for artists' fairs and the like, although it's undergoing renovation. But you could pop for a little drink in a live music venue coming up on the right hand side here. the Clutha, which takes its name from the Latin word for the Clyde. So we'll hit the stop button if you'd like off at stop 6. Also see a beautiful mural looking out over the Clutha there, which depicts Charles Rennie Mackintosh, the famous architect and artist. Well, coming up on the left-hand side, we'll come to the Scotia Bar, which claims to be the oldest pub in Glasgow, and it's not the only one to make that claim. Definitely an old building though, dating back to the late 18th century. And it was in the Scotia and other nearby venues that Billy Connolly started out his entertainment career. Not as a comedian though, but as a musician in a folk group called the Humble Bums. The story goes that the banter, the chanting between the songs was better received than the songs themselves. And that's what prompted Billy to move into comedy instead, although I will note one of his bandmates in that group was Jerry Rafferty, who went on to huge musical success himself. Or maybe Billy was the weak musical link. On the left-hand side, the St Enoch Centre there, shopping centre or shopping mall, built on the site of the old St Enoch railway station. The name St Enoch, though, is ancient. It derives from St Bennu, who was St Mungo's mother and was believed to have been buried in this area, although we've never found definitive archaeological evidence for that. As we cross this next junction, if you look off to the right-hand side, past the Specsavers, we'll get another glimpse of the Tolbooth Steeple and the Tron Steeple. Well, the Tron Steeple, as I say, built back in the late 1500s. It's originally part of an even older church, the Church of Our Lady and St Anne. It was unfortunately destroyed by fire in the 18th century. The building it's now part of houses the famous Tron Theatre. If you're wondering about the word Tron, by the way, it comes with a lot of Scottish place names. It was an old medieval weighing device used on market days. On the left-hand side, we'll pass by the Trades Hall, this building with the lanterns and the floral arrangement outside its entrance. And that's the final Robert Adam building we see, built in the 1790s, during which time Robert passed away. A place for the heads of Glasgow's 14 trade guilds to meet up, discuss economic cooperation, workers' insurance, things like that. And also charitable donations. It was an endowment from the trade guilds that led to the establishment of the Royal Infirmary. So Old Savings Bank on the left-hand side here, designed by John James Burnett. So next stop we'll come to is stop number 7. Now it's a stop for the Gallery of Modern Art for Buchanan Street, and it's an alternative stop you can use for Queen Street Station and George Square. Hit the stop button just now if you'd like off at stop 7.
Shopping centre. The name is Princess Square.
Incidentally, the district when it just now is called the Merchant City. This was a name coined in the 1960s when it was being regenerated. Refers to the merchants, traders of tobacco, cotton and others who plied their trade here in the 18th century Glasgow. And roughly speaking, the district corresponds to what Glasgow was up until the 19th century when it saw this rapid Victorian development. This building in front of us was a mansion house. This would have been the West End of Glasgow back in the late 1700s when it was first built. Today is the Gallery of Modern Art, or the GOMA, which, like most of our museums, is free to visit, but you don't even need to go inside to see an example of a kind of modern art. Sitting in front of it is a statue of the Duke of Wellington, who, like Nelson, was a commander during the Napoleonic Wars. This statue was originally created by the sculptor Baron Carlo Marichetti in the 1840s, but has been decorated since the 1980s by anonymous Glaswegians with a traffic cone on his head. And it's the placement cone that's led this to become one of the most iconic and photographed statues in Britain. Banksy has described it as his favourite public work of art in the UK. Seen as an emblem of our cheeky sense of humour, it was actually regarded as an act of vandalism putting the cone up there for years. The council removing it as soon as it appeared and even threatening to raise the plinth that the Duke stands on to deter would-be decorators, a rather naive prospect, I suspect. There was also a huge public outcry about this, and the plan was quickly abandoned. So this next stretch of the tour shows us a lot of Glasgow's Victorian heartland. There's a lot of truly stunning architecture on this next little stretch. First up, looks like we might have some people joining us at stop 7. Oh, nope. Must be waiting for the airport bus instead. So we're going to cross over Buchanan Street into St Vincent Street. And some of you might recognise this street even if you've never been to Glasgow before. It featured the two major Hollywood movies of last year. The Flash, where we doubled up for Gotham City, and Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, where we were at 1969 New York. Hollywood is an increasingly common visitor to Glasgow in recent times, using us to double up for American locations, both real and fictional. We've also been Philadelphia in the movie World War Z. You can see George Square, the city centre, very prominently in that one. We've been another version of Gotham City in The Batman with Robert Pattinson. That features the cathedral and the necropolis, and like I say, that area's going to be in the new Frankenstein movie. We've been 1970s San Francisco and Cloud Atlas, and New York in a number of adaptations, including The House of Mirth and the more recent The Buccaneers. On the right hand side in a moment we'll get our first view of Glasgow Central Station. We'll be looking at the facade of the Grand Central Hotel, rather fancy hotel where young John F. Kennedy actually stayed in 1969. Central Station today is the busiest train station in Glasgow, in Scotland in fact. There's one of two major railway terminuses in the city, the other being Queen Street Station. We actually used to have 4, today we've just got 2, which is rather apt as our population is smaller than it used to be. In fact, it's roughly half what it was prior to World War II, when we hit about 1.3 million. Now, roughly speaking, half that. So once these lights turn green, if you have a look to the right hand side, we'll get another view of Glasgow Central Station. And between the station and the Tim Hortons, we'll see a rather unique building called the Grant Arms, which is an old hotel built back in the 18th century, or possibly even earlier. We don't actually know how old it is. Certainly a rather unique building in Glasgow. So we'll see that off to the right hand side there. Also on the right hand side we pass by this building here called the Crystal Palace. At least that's what it's trading as today, originally Gardner and Sons. One of the first buildings out of London anywhere in the world to adopt some of the design ideas, innovations of that famous space. Such as being built with a metal superstructure, like the much larger windows than contemporary architecture. Our next stop we'll come to is stop number 8. That is the stop for Glasgow Central Station. Press the stop button if you'd like off now. It's also the stop for a number of hotels. And take a note of where the stop is. As it's actually a slightly different location from how it appears on the map. So it's just in here on the left hand side, as opposed to it being round the corner as it appears on the map. Have we got anyone joining us here? So we've got a couple of folk coming off, so. As we come up to this next junction, if you have a look up to the right hand side, we'll get the best view of Central Station that we get on the tour. And take particular note of the beautiful wrought ironwork which is holding up this ceiling, as that's where we get the name of Scotland's best-selling soft drink, Iron Brew. Now, Iron Brew was originally known as Strachan's Brew, but in the early 1900s they were awarded the contract to provide refreshment to glaziers, steelworkers and others who were renovating the station, adding on a couple of extra platforms. And in honour of that beautiful wrought ironwork, they renamed Strachan's Brew as Iron Brew. At least that's what the manufacturers claim. It may of course just been a good marketing opportunity, giving us the fondly remembered advertising tagline, Iron Brew, made in Scotland from girders. I should note that Iron Brew isn't actually made from girders. Also doesn't contain significant nutritional levels of iron, and it also isn't brewed, but good name for a drink. And it is made in Scotland. Now, the street we're going to travel along just now is known as Argyle Street. It actually used to be known as the Westergate, meaning the way to the west. You see gate on a Scottish street name, typically it means way as opposed to entrance. It was renamed though after the death in 1761 of the 3rd Duke of Argyll, Archibald Campbell, who at the time of his death was possibly the most powerful figure in Scotland as the head of Clan Campbell. He's also an incredibly wealthy landowner. And to be given a kind of procession in his honour that took him the route of the way to the west out towards the aforementioned Inverary, his ancestral home. Looking modern buildings here on the right hand side, the Anveston Centre, example of a 1960s idea which then was known as a mega structure. The word means something different now. A whole city block with a mixed use development, commerce, retail, residential, etc. On the left hand side, Kentigern House. Kentigern incidentally was Mungall's original birth name. Mungall was a name he acquired later in life. And the unusual looks of Kentigern House are because it's a Ministry of Defence building that, in theory, its unusual shape would mitigate against damage caused by explosive attacks. Although luckily the theory has never had to be tested out. Now, Argyle Street used to be one of the longest streets in the UK, until it was split in two in the 1960s and 70s, with the construction of the M8 motorway, Scotland's busiest road that links most of Scotland's population. Glasgow is somewhat unique amongst UK cities in having a motorway come through the middle of the city rather than around the outskirts. Incidentally, the guy who came up with this idea went by the name of Robert Bruce, no relation to the famous king. And a very different reputation. This Bruce is hated in Scotland, especially in Glasgow, where the damage his project wreaked. A lot of beautiful old buildings demolished, and there could have been even more if he'd had his full way. He wanted the M8 built as a ring road, not an orbital round the city though, but going through the city, surrounding the new city centre, the eastern section of which would have ploughed through the merchant city, removing even more of our architectural heritage. And even what they did build was beset by problems. For example, the motorway is carried over the River Clyde and over our heads by this structure, the Kingston Bridge. It was designed to carry 20,000 vehicles per day. But by the 1990s, it was carrying 10 times that capacity. Rather worryingly, especially for those of us on a bus coming to a set of red traffic lights, the Kingston started to crack and crumble under all this extra weight. There was a risk of it falling down entirely. Now the good news is they fixed it. In a rather remarkable engineering achievement, it was lifted up by means of huge hydraulic jacks, allowing for additional support to be put into the foundations. On the quayside, as well as repair work carried out on the superstructure. And even more remarkably, all of this was done without the bridge ever closing to traffic. As I say, the motorway is the busiest road in Scotland. This, in fact, the busiest road river crossing in Europe. Now we have another couple of murals by Sam Bates here. He gave us the beautiful one of St Mungo up on the High Street. On the left-hand side is Generation Green. Commissioner in advance of Glasgow hosting the COP26 Climate Change Conference, while in front of us is Swimmers and Divers. Commissioned to celebrate Glasgow hosting the 2014 Commonwealth Games, and looks like we might be holding the next Commonwealth Games as well in 2026. We'll see what happens there. Now we will see some Commonwealth Games venues very shortly, although first up will be stop number 10, which serves the Radisson Red Hotel, the Hilton Garden Inn, and you can also use this to cross over the River Clyde, get some great views of the river. So press the stop button just now if you'd like over at stop 10. And we come now to the Broomielaw district, a historic shipping area. Glasgow, in fact, used to be the third busiest port in Britain after London and Liverpool. And the banks here would have been lined with hundreds of vessels. There would have been huge cargo ships and ocean liners, and also much smaller boats like fishing boats. The little passenger vessels that were bringing over all the folk starting new lives in Glasgow at this time, the hundreds of thousands of them. And it was also here that Glaswegians would depart on the annual holiday known as going down the water, or down the water. Folk would take little boats known as Clyde steamers down to coastal resorts on the Firth of Clyde like Ardrossan or Weems Bay. This used to be the main form of holiday excursion enjoyed by Glaswegians. On the left-hand side, quite a modern bridge there, which is officially known as the Clyde Arc, although everyone in Glasgow simply knows it as the Squinty Bridge, as you might have spotted. It doesn't go straight across the river. There's a couple of round brick buildings, which I'll talk about in a moment, as looks like there's some folk to join us here at stop 10. So I'll be back with you in a moment or two.
Ja, eigen drinken.
Sorry folks, there's no standing. I'll free up this seat for you though, you can use this instead. Need that to confirm all the questions I'll get later on. So for the folks who've just joined us, welcome aboard. My name is Ross and our driver is Saul. And then the next stop will come to stop 11. That's the stop for the Scottish Events Campus in Glasgow Science Centre. Hit the stop button if you'd like off there. So the two round brick buildings we just saw, we'll get another view of them in a moment. They used to house spiral staircases and huge hydraulic lifts that would take people and vehicles down to a couple of tunnels that traversed the river at this point. Those have been sealed off since the 1980s, though unfortunately only lasted about a century. Bit of a pity, I feel, but there we go. And now we're heading into the events campus. Off to the right hand side is the Oval Hydro, a venue that opened in 2013 with a concert by Rod Stewart. And the following year held the gymnastics and netball events at the Commonwealth Games. Well, immediately in front of us we have the building that used to be known as the Clyde Auditorium, which held the weightlifting events at the Commonwealth Games. The Clyde Auditorium, as it was then known, was designed by the architect Norman Foster. I'll come back to that in a moment. Got another couple of folk are joining us. Excuse me, there is still a couple of seats left upstairs. Welcome aboard, folks. My name's Saul. No, it's not. My name's Ross. Our driver is Saul. Yeah, you don't want me driving this bus, believe me. I do, actually, yeah. So the Clyde Auditorium was designed by Norman Foster to reflect our maritime heritage. It's supposed to look like interlocking boat hulls. A lot of people feel it looks instead like the Sydney Opera House. Although we gave it another nickname here in Glasgow. We called it the Armadillo, which is what everyone started calling it. And so popular was this name that it started causing a problem. It was still officially called the Clyde Auditorium. That's how it would be advertised. If folk would come to Glasgow for events being advertised as being held at this Clyde Auditorium, we'd ask the locals for directions, and the locals would be like, "Hey, we'd no idea what they were talking about." So not long after the Commonwealth Games, they officially changed the name of the building to the Glasgow Armadillo. Democracy in action. Now coming up on the right hand side, we have the holiest building in Glasgow. Yeah, I know that's an awful joke. It's the last official day of the Edinburgh Fringe today, so that's simply a car park built for the events campus. We have a pedestrian bridge up ahead of us, emblazoned with Glasgow's unofficial motto, "People make Glasgow." Our official motto is actually "Let Glasgow Flourish." You'll see that on the coat of arms, along with the bird, the bell, the fish and the bee. Of the tree. Down to the left, another view of the Armadillo, and we also pass by the oldest part of the events campus, the SEC Centre, which opened in 1984. And the whole complex is actually built on reclaimed land. Up until the 1980s, this was the Queen's Dock of Glasgow, a huge basin cut into the side of the river, stretching from the Finnieston Crane up to the railway line to our right-hand side, and all the way down to the Clydeside Distillery, which we'll see in a moment, and which is our next stop, stop number 11A. So press the stop button just now if you'd like off at stop 11A. Now we can also see the Pacific Quay development down to the left. That's on the other side of the river. And that was formerly the Prince's Docks. Also largely reclaimed in the 1980s, although there's a little bit more of the old Victorian docklands there left. The Pacific Quay development includes, as you can see off to the left, the headquarters of BBC Scotland, the wedge-shaped building with the curved roof, which is the Glasgow Science Centre, and pointing up into the sky is the Glasgow Tower, an observation tower offering views of up to 25 miles. It's the tallest building in Glasgow, and it's the tallest structure in the world that can rotate 360 degrees. The whole thing can turn. The idea is it aligns itself with the wind, and clever aerodynamics stop it from shaking about too much. I think the term is splitting the airflow. Other aerodynamicist on my last one. So here on the left-hand side is the Clydeside Distillery, the first single malt whisky distillery in Glasgow for over 100 years. And it's partly built in an old hydraulic station that would have powered equipment here at the mouth of the old Queen's Dock. The newer part of the building has also rather cleverly been designed so we'll be able to see the beautiful whisky stills. Not just yet, but once we're moving away from the stop, look down to the left-hand side and you'll see the whisky stills through the windows. Excuse me. We'll see them through the windows. Incidentally, whisky making in Glasgow does have a strong tradition. Been bottled and blended here for years and aged, but very rarely being distilled. Now we're at some Clyde-built ships to look at now. Down to the left-hand side is the TS Queen Mary, that little white vessel on the other side of the river. It's an old Clyde steamer, originally launched in the early 1930s. Not currently seaworthy, but undergoing renovation as we speak. Up ahead of us we see the tall ship, the Glenlee, its yellow masts there, and off in the distance you might have noticed a dark grey tower, quite a tapering tower, which is the bridge tower of HMS Cardiff. The newest ship to be built on the River Clyde. It's one of the new Type 26 class of frigates being developed for the British and Australian navies. It's a lead ship, incidentally, the latest vessel to bear the name of this city, HMS Glasgow, undergoing sea trials just now. Now down to the left-hand side, the large grey building is the Riverside Museum, the 2013 European Museum of the Year. This building was designed by the Iraqi architect Zaha Hadid. And again, the idea was to capture our maritime heritage, in this case, the undulating waves of the ocean. And don't worry, that's not the queue to get into the Riverside Museum. Down to the left-hand side there's a major charity event on for Beatson, a cancer charity. They're having I thought it was actually a fun run, but I think it's a kind of more of a walk, a sponsored walk. Somewhat ironically, everyone's decided to get here by car, so take us a moment or two to get down to the stop. But next stop is stop number 12, so if anyone would like us at stop 12, hit the stop button just now. Again, do remain seated until I announce that we're at the stop though.
They had old cars and moors and transports.
The Riverside Museum, incidentally, is built on the site of an old shipyard, A&J Inglis, who are perhaps best known as being the ones who constructed the Waverley, which is the last ocean-going paddle steamer in the world, and continues to run trips down the water, or down the water, as we say here. museum also built at the confluence, the meeting point of Glasgow's two most famous rivers, the Clyde and the Kelvin. We'll see the River Kelvin in a moment or two, although just a quick note, Glasgow was originally founded not on the banks of the Clyde or the Kelvin. It was founded on the banks of the Mollendina Burn. For those not familiar with the Scots language, burn is a word that means a small stream. And the Mollendina flows at the bottom of the Green Hollow, that little valley that's found between the cathedral and the necropolis. Although it's what's known as a lost river, you can't actually see it today. It was gradually built over during Glasgow's rapidly developing years in the 19th century. And again, our population goes from a few tens of thousands to well over 1 million. Kind of comparison to what happened in Glasgow in the Victorian time, kind of modern idea. You need to look at Abu Dhabi, for example, or maybe Singapore, something like that. Okay folks, sorry for the delay there. That's us moving again. Yes, so going back to the events of the 80s, the question of what Glasgow's economic future would hold was answered in part in 1988, the year after the straw locomotive, with the Glasgow Garden Festival of 1988. As I say, this was based on a German idea, the Buntes Gartenschau. We saw the old Princely Stocks being transformed into beautiful parklands. Sorry, Saul, you want me to guide you back? The Princely Stocks transformed into beautiful gardens for the Glasgow Garden Festival, a hugely popular event that revolutionised Glasgow's reputation and was hugely popular. Over 4 million people over the course of the 6 months the festival was running, visiting the city. It really turned our reputation around and kick-started our tourist industry. So this is now stop number 12. Two seats upstairs under the covers. Sorry, can you wait? 2 seats upstairs under the covers, 2 seats which are semi-covered. There is no standing on this bus. And not long after the Garden Festival of 1988, Glasgow was a European city of culture. These two events really helping to transform our reputation after these rather grim days of the 1970s and early 80s, when there was a lot of social and economic deprivation. We're now a very vibrant, modern, cosmopolitan and multicultural city. Also see up to the right hand side on the hill there's an old hospital currently being demolished. That's the York Hill Children's Hospital. You only mention that because that is where Andy Murray, the tennis great who recently retired, was born. He was raised in Dunblane, but Dunblane didn't have a maternity hospital. So for a few hours he was Glaswegian. So here's River Kelvin now, down to the left hand side. Get a better view there of HMS Cardiff and the BA Systems shipyard of Govan. Didn't mention that new pedestrian bridge, which we'll get another glimpse of down to the left hand side there. That's opening in 2 weeks' time, 2 weekends. Going to link two of Glasgow's most famous districts, Govan, which is on the south from here, and Partick here in the north. Both areas famous for football connections. Govan, the present home of Rangers Football Club. Well, sort of, actually their stadium is being renovated, but that's a different issue. Partick, the original home of Partick Thistle. And also the home of the West of Scotland Cricket Club ground, which is where in 1872 Scotland and England played what people recognise as being the first international football match in history. Ended in a 0-0 draw. But international football, we recently had the Euros and the Copa America all starting in a little cricket club ground here in Partick, which back then was still an independent town. Today Partick is part of the West End of Glasgow, a very cosmopolitan, trendy area held in no small part by being the current home of the University of Glasgow. So for those who weren't here earlier, the University of Glasgow was originally founded in 1451, back in what is now the East End of Glasgow. The fourth oldest in the English-speaking world after Oxford, Cambridge and St Andrews. But it moved to its present site in the 1870s. And just up ahead of us you can see a tall tower with a spire. That's the main building of the University of Glasgow. Also known as the Gilbert Scott Building after its architect, Sir George Gilbert Scott. It's the largest neo-Gothic building in the UK outlet of London. And it's now the second tallest building in Glasgow, after the completion of the Glasgow Tower in the early 2000s. Famous students at the university over the years, in either of its guises, including names associated with the Scottish Enlightenment, for example, like the economist Adam Smith and the philosopher David Hume. A number of important medics. Dr. Joseph Lister, I mentioned earlier on, regarded as the father of modern surgery. There's also Dr. James McCune Smith, the first African American to hold a medical degree. And Dr. John Lloyd Orr, the 1949 Nobel Peace Prize recipient for his efforts in eradicating worldwide malnutrition. And maybe most famously William Thomson, who you'll know as Lord Kelvin, the Irish-born physicist. So for those who weren't here at the very start of the tour, we are on a diversion just now. Owing to roadworks, we cannot access stops 13, 14 and 15. So the next stop is stop 16. That is the stop for the Kelvin Grove Art Gallery and Museum. And currently it's also the stop for Byres Road, the West End of Glasgow and the University of Glasgow. Can I again ask that if folks are having conversations, you try to keep your voices as low as possible. It is important that other people can hear the commentary. So if anyone would like off at stop 16, if you can press the stop button just now. Now in a moment we will turn on to Dumbarton Road, which takes its name from the ancient capital of the Kingdom of Strathclyde. That's actually the kingdom that Glasgow was founded in. Back in the 6th century, when we're founded, Scotland hasn't come to be. Broadly speaking, what becomes Scotland arising from the Kingdom of Strathclyde, the Kingdom of Dalriada, and the British Confederation. Up to the left there is Byres Road, a very trendy area with a lot of great places to grab a bite to eat. It is open. There's roadworks elsewhere, that means we can't get into it. And coming up ahead of us, we'll get a better view of the Gilbert Scott Building in just a moment or two on the Gilmore Hill to the left-hand side. Incidentally, a lot of people think of Scots Gaelic as being the original language of Scotland. In truth, it's a little bit more complicated than that. An early form of Scots Gaelic was spoken in Dalriada, but here in Strathclyde the common language was Cumbric, which is more similar to modern day Welsh than modern day Gaelic. Should know Cumbric goes extinct at some point in the very early 2nd millennium. We don't actually know how any of these words have said, like Thenw or Kentigern, would have actually been pronounced. And the Pictish language, we've really no idea what it was. Doesn't survive except for a couple of proper nouns. So we're going to cross over the River Kelvin again in a moment on the left-hand side. It's Kelvin Grove Park, second oldest public park in Glasgow, a beautiful green space laid out in the 1850s to a plan by Joseph Paxton. On the right-hand side we'll see the Kelvin Hall, which was built in the 1920s as the main exhibition space in Glasgow, and designed to reflect the architecture of this beautiful building coming up on the left, the Kelvin Grove Art Gallery and Museum. In fact, the Kelvin Grove Museum and the Gilbert Scott Building, my two favourite buildings in Glasgow. Now we can't access the university directly just now, as I say, so anyone who's getting off here who wants to visit the university campus, just walk backwards a little bit and then head into that gate there. Use that little bridge, leads you to a very gentle sweeping path that will take you up to the Gilbert Scott Building. And that's us now pulling up to stop 16 for the folk who want to hop off here, which I imagine will be quite a few, even if just for the Kelvin Grove Museum. Back with you shortly.
Okay, let's come up here. We'll come down next stop, I guess.
So, 1 second, Sol, I think, did the button just light up again? Someone else ending off, or? No, just an accidental press, that's okay, these things happen. Sorry, Sol, false alarm. The Kelvin Grove Museum was initially funded with profits from the Great Exhibition of 1888 that had been held in Kelvin Grove Park. Designed by E.J. Milner Allen and Sir John Simpson, the building opened to the public in 1901. It's now the most visited museum in the UK, out with of London, and the most visited free tourist attraction in Scotland. One or two castles elsewhere in Scotland get more visitors, but they charge you for the privilege. I won't mention them by name, but let's just say one of them's in the east coast of Scotland, the Malcolm IV, the capital of Scotland. Up to the left, the best view of the Gilbert Scott Building we get on the tour. And we also have the beautiful bowling greens here, the final Commonwealth Games venue that we'll see. And then the next stop we'll come to is stop 17. That's the stop for the Finniston District, the Hidden Lane, and the Guruvara Sangaba. Hit the button now if you'd like off at 17. Up to the left, Park Circus on the hill there was the west end of Glasgow as it was in the 1850s. That was then the western edge of Glasgow. And we're now going to head along Stocky Hall Street. The street's name comes from the Old Scots Socky, meaning willow, and Haw, meaning meadow. It's a street of three very distinct characters. The western section still partly bringing to mind the idea of the willow meadow. The central section very suddenly changes character to becoming a kind of hub of entertainment. Then the eastern section becomes part of what's known as the Golden Zed, or the Style Mile, being precinct for shopping in Glasgow, which makes a kind of Z shape on a street map. So next stop we'll come to stop number 18 for Charing Cross, for the Tenement House Museum. A for the Royal Highland Fusiliers Museum. They were there for one stop at stop number 18. Press the stop button just now.
Dick.
And when we move across this next junction, look down to the right hand side and we'll get a great view of the beautiful Gurudwara Singaba. A magnificent Sikh temple, funded entirely by donations from the local Sikh community, which is now the largest indoor religious gathering space in Scotland. As you'll see in a moment, it's pink. Unlike the pale yellow or darker red of most of the sandstone buildings in Glasgow, it's made of Indian sandstone. If you look up to the left as we cross the next junction, you'll see Park Circus. Not that junction there, the next one up to the left here. Particularly, you'll see Park Church and Trinity College, two of its most stunning landmarks. Trinity College, the main ecclesiastical college here in Glasgow.
Yes, yeah, same one as we've seen it over this one. It's just the interior of the cathedral, everything else about it's fine.
100 years later, they were looking at renovating it. Charing Cross Mansions, as I say, designed by John James Burnett in the 1890s. And roughly 100 years later, they were working on the exterior, doing some renovation, and nobody remembered the clock. Ever displaying the right time, they decided to fix it. When they took the clock off of the wall, they were surprised to discover that there was no mechanism. In fact, there was no space for a mechanism. Turned out the clock had never run. Nobody had thought to check the records. So I think we do have some folk for stop number 18. It looks like there's some folk we're going to pick up as well. So I'll be pausing the comments area in a moment. We'll take a note of this beautiful Art Deco building coming up on the left, Beresford. It's got one very important historic detail about that I'll share with you in a moment. So this is now 18 for the folk who want to hop off here. So this building on the left, the Beresford, that is where John F. Kennedy, yes, that JFK, gave his first ever public speech. 1939, early days of World War II. Back then it was a hotel, temporarily housing American survivors of a passenger vessel that had been sunk in the early days of World War II. Oh, next up, yes. Sir, can you take a seat, please? Thank you. On the left-hand side is what remains of the Macintosh building of the Glasgow School of Art, and next stop is number 19. Press the button if you'd like off there. The Macintosh building of the Glasgow School of Art devastated by fires in 2014 and 18. We're doing everything we can to preserve it, including not redeveloping these other businesses affected by the second fire. Well, we can see an extant Macintosh building just up ahead of us, Macintosh at the Willow. Just there we see the two black and white signs there, a beautiful tea room that Charles Rennie Macintosh designed for the great entrepreneur Miss Kate Cranston. Not just designing the exterior, but a lot of the interior as well, the place settings, and the cutlery in some cases. On the right hand side, the GFT Glasgow Film Theatre. Main independent cinema in Glasgow. built in the 1930s at a time when Glasgow was home to over 100 cinemas. Now, there's nowhere near that number today, for a start our population is smaller, and this was before television took over everything. Glasgow, though, is still a great place for an evening's entertainment per head of population. We have more seats in auditoria than any other city in the United Kingdom. And this is the traditional theatre district we're coming to now, along with stop number 20. So hit the stop button if you'd like off at 20. That's also the stop for the Hilton Doubletree Hotel and the National Piping Centre. Now, that's not piping as in plumbing, that's piping as in bagpipes. Held a number of events in the lead up to the piping competition last weekend. It does have a little museum which is free to visit. You can also do guided tours of the museum, which cost around about £5 to get a demonstration from a professional piper. And you can also give them a shot yourself if you're feeling grateful. Now, the first bit of our theatre district we'll see coming up on the left-hand side is the Royal Conservatoire of Scotland, formerly the Royal Scottish Academy of Music and Drama. And we're going to get a nice look at that off to the left, as we've sort of got some folk joining us at stop 20. So we're just going to free up these seats and pause the commentary again for a moment.
Only 3 seats left on the stairs, folks.
Plenty of seats left upstairs as long as you're willing to sit outside, I should say.
Planning in a manner. Columbus. This looks like Columbus.
Yeah, there's only seats outside if you're going to go upstairs. So for the folk who have just joined us, welcome aboard. My name is Ross and our driver is Sol. So again, Conservatoire on the left hand side. As we move across the junction, you'll also see the Theatre Royal. Between the two of them, as you look up the street, is the National Piping Centre.
Excuse me, it's difficult enough for everybody to hear me with the rain being on, so you need to keep your conversations as low as possible. Okay? Thank you.
Coming up on the right hand side, we'll pass by the Pavilion Theatre, Scotland's home of variety, our equivalent of vaudeville if you like. And then the next stop we'll come to is 21. Looks like the light is lit for that. That's the stop for Buchanan Bus Station, for the Royal Concert Hall, and for the Buchanan Galleries Shopping Centre. They can also access the galleries from stop 1 and 7. So on the right hand side, we're going to pass by the Cineworld Renfrew Street, recognised by Guinness as being the tallest cinema in the world. There was a cinema in Tokyo, Japan, that claimed to be taller, but that was only by virtue of an antennae of the International Federation of Tall Buildings, where the folk you call in when there's an issue like this, ruled that the antennae doesn't count. This one's only the Tokyo one's only the second tallest, that one remains the tallest. The views from inside, whether you're watching a movie or looking out over the north and the east of the city, can be quite spectacular. The views from outside, not as well regarded. In fact, when this building was completed in the early 2000s, the great British public voted it the ugliest new building in Britain. Which I feel is rather harsh. I can think of uglier buildings built in Glasgow at roughly the same time. I don't point them out to people on the tour, honestly, but I know where they are. I'm just thinking about the movies that are out of cinema just now with Glasgow connections. Best one I can do is Deadpool and Wolverine, which features Greg Hempel. Born in Glasgow, spent some time in Canada but came back to study at the University of Glasgow and went on to create those great Glasgow set comedy shows, Still Game and Chewing the Fat. On the right hand side we have the Royal Concert Hall there, which opened in the 1990s. On the left hand side our main bus station, the Buchanan bus station. And behind that is the third of Glasgow's 3 universities, Glasgow Caledonian. So that's us now at stop 21. And for that screeching there, the microphone got a wee bit close to a speaker. So across from the bus station to the left, the third of Glasgow's 3 universities, Glasgow Caledonian, founded in 1993. Now in a moment we'll be coming back to stop number 1 on George Square, which is where its tour will be finishing, but it will be starting again after just after a minute or so, if that. We'll see who's hopping off the bus, we'll see who's coming on board, and we'll also be changing the guide. So if you want to stay on board, as I say, this bus will head off again almost as soon as it's arrived back at George Square. The next bus with multiple languages, the multilingual service, recorded is at 3:36. If you are finished travelling with us for today, do hold on to your ticket. You can get a discount at other city sightseeing operators worldwide, though there are 1 or 2 exceptions. And if you want to travel with us again tomorrow, and you only have a 1-day ticket, bring it back tomorrow. We can upgrade you, just pay the price difference. And finally, a couple of statues I want to talk about. The one in the middle of the square depicts Sir Walter Scott, the great romantic novelist and poet, while the one to the right of that was Robert Burns, the great poet. And a forward-thinking individual who in many ways championed the common